day to you all, it's Lunar Brit here, and today I have a Blender tutorial. I know that there's been many tutorials on Blender for don't know how many years, but what I'm going to be doing is teach you 2.77, which is the current version of Blender until 2.78 comes out, whenever that will be. If it does come out, then I'll be doing tutorials on that one. But most people generally go on Blender tutorials to see how to make this, how to do that, and all that stuff. Well, today I'm going to be explaining what certain features of your user interface will do, including hotkeys to certain things like how to move this cube, how to move these lamps, how to scale the cube, things like that, how to add more objects in without going over to the add tab down here or over here to create. But first things first, we want to do is know how to navigate around the scene. Now, to navigate around the scene, obviously you don't know if you're very new to the software. If you are new to the software, you can go and download Blender 2.77 from the link below, and you can also I need a script, I know that much. I will have scripts in future, but yeah, if you're new, if you haven't got Blender, you can download it from their website. It's free, so you don't need to pay for it. You can also, if you are new to it, then you already know this user face, but this is for people who don't know Blender at all and don't know how to use it. So first things first, we want to know is how to navigate around your scene. Well, there are a few ways. First thing, the middle mouse button. If you press that down, you can rotate around your scene. Now, some people mistake, not all people, I'm sure everyone who uses a computer now knows that the middle mouse button is also your scroll wheel. And your scroll wheel controls your zoom in and zoom out, like so. So you click the middle mouse button to rotate, scroll wheel to zoom in and out. But how do you actually transition yourself, like slide and move to the sides and up and down? Well, one way you can do this is to hold down the left shift key and then hold the middle mouse button, and then you can move around like so. Also, if you are holding down the left shift key and you're using the scroll wheel, you can go up and you can go down like so. Holding down the control key, the left control key, and using the middle mouse button allows you to smoothly zoom in and out like so. So I will go over them again. Middle mouse button to rotate, scroll wheel to zoom in and out, left shift key and middle mouse button to move. The left shift key and a scroll wheel to move up and down, the left control key and a middle mouse button to zoom in and out. And also, if you use the scroll wheel with the left control key, you can go side to side like so. So that is the basic controls of moving around your scene. Now the next thing you would want to do is select an object. For example, we've got the cube selected at the moment, but if you wanted to select something like your light and move it, first thing that comes to your head would be just to click it like so. Like so. Why is it doing that? The reason it's doing that because Blender uses the right mouse button to select objects. The left mouse button puts where your cursor is, and your cursor is where you put, or when you create an object, this is where the object will spawn on this cursor. You want to bring that cursor back to the center. I will tell you that now. If you say that you got your cursor down here, but you don't want to add the object there, you always want your object on the grid, primarily in the middle, like where the cube is. One thing you can do is press the Shift C, and it brings it to back to the center. Now what Shift C however actually does, it doesn't just put the cursor in the center, it puts your scene view around all your objects in your scene. So if I went like move over here and scroll down here only at the cube.
No.
Yes?
There's some stuff in the washing machine. Can you chuck it in the tumbler for us?
Okay. Yeah. So let's say I've got one view on this cube. If I press Alt C now, it scales me out. So you see the camera and the lamp. You want to know how I deselected that lamp? I just pressed the A key. The A key allows you to select all objects as well as deselect them. So if I press A key now, every object is selected. If I click on the camera, it only selects just the camera. Now if I press A, it deselects the camera. Now, we know if you want to select multiple objects, like you want to select the cube and the lamp, obviously right clicking ain't going to do it for you. So what you do, if you say we selected this cube with the right mouse button, hold down your left shift key and right click on the lamp. Now you have selected both the lamp and the cube. Okay, next thing we're going to go through is how to move an object, and rotate an object, and scale an object. To do this, simply click on this box that's in the middle of your scene. Now, what do these arrows mean? These arrows means which direction you will move the cube in, and things like that. So this green one represents the y-axis, as you see down here. You see that Y with the green line. Now you click on this arrow, it moves the cube in a y-axis. This blue arrow represents the z-axis, and that's height. So you can go up and down like so. And this red one here is your x-axis, as you see down there, which allows you to move along this line. Okay, that's how you move a box. The hotkey to move, before I get to the hotkeys, where you see this circle, this right circle, this allows you to freely move it like so, but it only moves it in the directions based on the view that you are looking through. Pretty much I put it back to the middle. Okay, hotkeys for moving this object. If you are used to software like Autodesk Maya, then you know that the W key controls the hotkeys of selecting your movement or translation. In Blender, the key to translation is the G key. G stands for grab in my philosophy, so you can grab your cube like so. One thing I didn't mention when you are in this motion, if you're using hotkeys to move your object, if you press the left mouse button, it places it where you moved it. If you press the G key again and move it up here, and then press the Y key, or the right mouse button, sorry, it moves it back to its last place it was. Because your left key is your accept, or left mouse button is your accept, your right mouse button is your deselect. Now, if you look at that, this box is down here. That is your transformation manipulators. This one is your translate, which is the one we've got right now, which is movement. The next one is rotation, and rotation allows you to move the object on these axes like so. Obviously, if you use this right circle one, that allows you to move it based on where you're viewing your scene, like so. So if I do it now, it goes that way, and I do it again here, it goes that way. It's based on where you're viewing your object. It's like here, I can rotate it around like so. Okay. The hotkey for rotating objects is the R key. Just like you do in Maya, but the R key in Maya is the scale key, like hotkey. But obviously with Blender, R is for rotation. Your next one is scale, which we all know what scale is. Scales you that way, scale you that way, and we can scale you upwards like so. So we made a big box. The right circle obviously is universal scale, like so. So we can scale it back down. The hotkey for scaling is, yes, the S key. For S for scale. So you can scale like that. That is the pretty basics. Now, if we want to position this cube back the way it was, you would go. I will tell you that in later on. Actually, this tutorial is going to be long because some of these are actually quite important, and it's important to know this. But let's just say you want to move this object, translate your object in a specific direction. Because if you just press the G key now, it moves it like so. But if you want to move them on part of these arrows, if you press the G key, you can press X, and that allows you to move on the X axis. Or you can press Y, allows you to move on the Y axis. Or you could press Z to move up and down. That only works as long as you press the hotkey, which is the G key. The same rule applies to when you are rotating. You can press the R key and then you press X, so it rotates on the X axis. And the same with the scale key. If you press the S key and then the Z key or C key, depending if you're American or English, British, we say Z in Britain. I'm not sure how you Americans pronounce it, but yeah, that is how you specifically go certain axes with hotkeys. Hotkeys make it more easy to move things about more faster, because all it is just press of a keys allows you to do these things. Autodesk Maya, as far as I am aware, does not allow you to do such commands like Blender does, which makes it more easier to use. There's also a way to move these objects based on proximity or specifications. If I was to, let's just say I press the G key, then I press the X key. Now, I want to move this box without using the mouse. To do that, if you press the G key for grabbing the object, then you press the X key for selecting the axis. If you press any of the numbers, like say with 5 for example, it moves it by 5. I can backspace on that to send it back, and I could do the same if I put a -5, it moves the other direction. That is how you can move your objects to certain points in your scene, if you want to be all technical and specific. Generally, that's how I normally work on my objects and models, especially if I'm making things like rooms and buildings and stuff like that. I generally use numbers so I can get an understanding of how tall, how wide, and how long my object is. Right, so we have now learnt the basic of navigating and moving our object in a scene, as well as selecting our objects with the right mouse button. That is how you move around in a scene. When I said about the user interface, I do mean the user interface, primarily with your outliner and your properties. Now let's start with the outliner. If you want to know how to move your screen like that, you just click on the edge here, like so, and you can just move it out. Okay, to begin with, we look at our outliner, which is this dot box here. What it shows is your scene, which is the scene we're looking at now. It's got its render layers, which is the layers as seen down here. These layers. At the that allows you to select objects that are inside those layers. All the objects are inside the first layer, as you can see here with that yellow dot thing inside this little box down here. So if I was to click on this little plus sign, it's got its render layers, and you've got all of what it can render in that scene. Next one we got is world. We will get to the world and layers sections a little later, because they're down here. But your outliner is basically a list of everything that you've got going on in your scene. We got our camera, you got your cube, and you got your lamp. Those are all the things that are currently present. Now, let's just say you got this thing. These symbols here, I will tell you what they are. The eye symbol, or icon, is restrict viewport visibility. What that means is, say if I've got the cube selected, if I click on this eye, it's gone. It's just gone. But I can bring that back by clicking on it again. Now, if I select this object and I press the H key, it does the same thing as hiding it. Now, you think as long as it's hidden in your scene, you can't touch it. So I can't select it or anything. It's not there. If you want to know how to bring back a hidden object, you can either click on your eye icon that has disappeared, or if you have your mouse in the scene here, you can press the left Alt key and H, and it brings it back. But be warned that the Alt H doesn't just bring back one object, it brings back all hidden objects, which isn't a bad thing, but if you want to be specific on what you want back, the eye icons up here is the best choice. Now this cursor option, if I deselect that, what that does is I can select the lamp, I can select the cube, but I cannot select the camera. This is handy and very important when you're making complex scenes. If you've got objects that you don't want to accidentally click on and move about, you can just deselect all these cursor icons so you don't select those objects by mistake. Very handy, very important for big projects that you've got planned or want to do. And then you got your last one, this camera, which restricts rendering. Now what these icons do is, if I click on the one for the cube is still there. The reason the cube is still there is because it's only hiding it when you go to render it. I won't be doing any renders in this tutorial today, but just telling you that this icon will hide whatever objects you got deselected on this icon will not be shown in your scene. If you hide it in the scene, here, it will still render out, but you just can't see it in your viewport. Okay, that is how these icons function. I did say that I was going to do the property as well, so we will just start with the property. Obviously, the first thing we got down in your property is this, your render. This is your control of what your scene will look like in the end, and what is set. You got your render, which allows you to render your scene, like with that. You got animation, which renders your whole animation along your selected timeline. And you got audio, which obviously renders your audios in your scenes. This display, it shows you exactly where it will be displayed. At the moment it is displayed in the image editor, which is where I would keep it for now, because your image editor can be selected by clicking on this box down here. Then you go to UV/image editor, and this is where your scene will be rendered. So let's go back to the 3D report. Dimensions, very important, because this is how you decide how your scenes work. Starting with your render presets. Your render presets are basically your standard presets of what you would expect certain videos to be. We won't be selecting any of them, because that's only if you really want to use the presets. I personally use my own custom preset, which ain't listed, but it's just custom. You just manually adjust these boxes down here. Now, you got your resolution. 1920 by 1080 is standard HD resolution. 720 is also standard, but it ain't relevant of today's time. If you see this percentage of scale render resolution here, it is wise that you keep it at 50% when you're doing test renders. That means that your entire scene will not be at 1920 by 1080. Instead, it will be at 960 by 540 resolution. You can change it to 100% when you are ready for your scene to be made. You got your frame range, which is how many frames that your animation will render. For example, we got 250. If I just left click on that and scale it down, if you see at the bottom of my screen, you can see the greyish, the darker grey, moving. It's because I am adjusting the range of how many frames it can render. Same with frame steps. At the moment, it's best to keep it at 1 frame, because if you change it to like 14, it will start at frame 1, as you see down here, but then its next frame will be 15, because you're skipping all the others. Frame rate is important for what you're doing. 24 frames and 29.97 frames is American standard animation frame rate. The United Kingdom's is 25 frames per second. Because I'm from the UK, I use 25 frames per second. You can even use 60 frames per second, which is video game speed, or you can do your own custom one. But for now, we're sticking with UK 25. Unless you're American, then we'll just put it back to 24. Aspect ratio is basically pretty much just like the ratio of your scene. I don't really mess around with that, I'll keep it as it is. Anti-aliasing is the buffer of your object. And if you look at my cube, you can see that it's got jagged edges. You can see like going down the top like steps. That is anti-aliasing. If I render it at 8, it gives you 8 samples. The best one is to use 16. Although it might slow down your rendering times depending on your computer. 16 gives you much sharper and smoother edges for your objects. Makes it more realistic. Full sample basically samples every single sample, which does take a long time to render. But it really depends on your computer really. It only solves the issues when it comes to compositing, as it says there. But I don't play with that either. You have your sampled motion blur, which is basically what is motion blur, where an object's moving and it's kind of got like a kind of ghost trail behind it. That ghost trail can be done depending on how you use your shutter and motion samples. When it comes to motion samples, I always go on 2. I figure that gives you a much more better effect, and I leave the shutter at least about 0.5. Shading is a rendering. It's a rendering process. It can render your textures and basically when it comes to textures, it means that the textures affects what your material's properties are. If you have that deselected, then if your object was shiny as a material but not as a texture, it will still be shiny because you untick this. Subsurface scattering, you can turn that off, so that means that if you got an object with subsurface scattering, it will go off. Same goes with shadows and environment map. Ray tracing is the process of the shadows from sharp shadows when it's closer to the object to soft shadows when it goes further away, depending on your lighting. And then you got your sky alpha. You can have it transparent, which means that if you are making an animation of a character but you want it to be in a live action video that you got producing, if you're doing college or university, you can change your alpha mode to transparent. So that means it only renders your character and other objects in your scene, but not the sky, which is handy if you're looking at CGI. Performance, that means how long it takes just for rendering. That's how I see it anyways. I don't go through all that. I don't go through all this either. All this stuff I don't go through. The only thing I do go through is output. PNG I know is best for objects with alpha layers. But if you're making a scene that ain't got like an alpha background, like the sky, then you can just change it to any other sequences. You can even change them to your output to animation, like so. This means that if I put on something like that, you can see that I know I've got something called encoding. And I can change that to an MPEG-4, which is a standard codec for the H2, with its codecs of H.264, which is one of the current and best codecs for videos, because it gives high quality videos but takes less memory. It compresses the memory basically, but preserves the quality. That's only if you select your output to a H.264. You can have it as any other video setup, but for now we're going to keep it on PNG, and you can see that encoding is now gone. because it's not rendering out a video. You also got bake. Now bake is important. Baking is best for video game development. I can tell you that 100% of all textures in video games from 2006 upwards have baked textures. And even if it's just a normal mapping, like the bumpiness of the texture, that is still baked, because the only way you can bake normal maps for video games is by using a baking system, because it has to bake a high polygon object. And what a high polygon object is, it is basically a object that's got more detail than the same object with that has less detail. It all depends on how much work you put into your objects. And this concludes the user interface on this site. Now my next video will go through the other side, or this side here. But as for now, I hope this video was enjoyable. I mean, this is my first Blender tutorial on this, basically on this topic. I want to help people who are new to 3D modeling and animations by starting with basics, just to help you work up to industry standard quality, so you have a bit of knowledge and understanding on how certain tools work. I will also continue in my next video on these other icons here and explain what they do. But if you have enjoyed, then that's good, and I will post another video tomorrow or sometime after